This video presentation is going to walk you through the qualifications for Bookshare and Learning Ally because you, as a reading specialist, dyslexia specialist, or specialized support teacher, will be accountable for qualifying the students on your campus that teachers submit for potential registration on this service. So Bookshare and Learning Ally are both provided through the Texas Education Agency as resources for digital books that offer flexible access to our students to print. So today's topic is going to be qualifications for Bookshare and Learning Ally. The learning objectives of this short video are that, number one, the participants will summarize the Chafee Amendment as it impacts copyright for individuals with disabilities. And that's really important because the Chafee Amendment is the statute under which we all are able to provide our students with print disabilities these flexible materials for their use without breaking copyright rule. So you have to make sure that you understand what the requirements are so that you are, again, in compliance with copyright. And then the second thing that we're going to hopefully accomplish today is that you will be able to identify students who exhibit the appropriate qualifications to be provided access to Learning Ally and Bookshare. Again, these are services that a student must qualify for. It's not just for any student. It's not like Amazon Kindle or Project Gutenberg or those other services that anyone can access. This is specifically for individuals with disabilities. So the Chafee Amendment was signed under Bill Clinton's presidency, but the bill that established the National Library Service, which is the service that people have used for many, many decades. That bill is much older, and that was the bill that set up the National Library Service for people who were blind, who were unable to access print. And my sister was one of the benefactors of that particular service. She was blinded in 1970s, and she was a student in junior high and high school, and she would get those big thick records, and her books would be on those records, and she would listen to those books. So things have changed quite a bit since then, but basically the first provision, or the first part of the Chafee Amendment, says that it is not an infringement of copyright for an authorized entity to reproduce or distribute a copy, and you can see all this for yourself, of a work in such a way that it can be accessed by a person with disabilities exclusively for that person. But part of the caveat of that is that you do have to have the material. You can't just go and randomly get materials and then distribute on the multitude these accessible materials. You have to be able to demonstrate that that recipient is a person with disabilities. And that is where your role as a qualifier comes in. So who are eligible for these services? Bookshare and Learning Ally, again, are the two services that provide not only library books, but oftentimes also textbooks, adopted textbooks in particular, and even some magazines and journals and things of that nature can be found on these repositories. There are hundreds of thousands of files. Some are in different languages. Most are in English by far. And you can see that they would be very helpful to a student who had a print disability. If you look at this slide, you can see that students who are blind can access these in Learning Ally auditorially. In Bookshare, both Braille or auditory files are available through a file format that's called DAISY files, but that's another whole topic, so we won't go there today. So students who are blind and low vision are automatically qualified for either of these services, regardless of whether they have an IEP or whether they're 504 or anything else. Of course, in the schools, they're going to be identified with some type of disability, most likely because they're going to need accommodations that we're going to need to provide. Students with dyslexia are also automatic qualifiers. So we have made an attempt with these services to upload all the students who have vision impairments and all the students who have been identified with dyslexia, because qualifying them is just another step. And so Mrs. Williams has provided a letter that says that the students in these particular eligibilities are in fact eligible for those services. And so you will find those students' names already up and loaded into Learning Ally, and hopefully soon into Bookshare. The next type of student that is a little bit more flexible is the student who has a learning disability. So the struggling reader who has a learning disability, if they have an identified reading disability, they also are eligible for these supports if they're if the support of the auditory support enhances their access to print. If they don't truly have a print disability, if they have low cognition, for example, let's say there's a 13-year-old who has the cognition of maybe a second grader, then if they're reading on the second grade level, we would not be able to qualify them for these services because they are reading at the level that they are capable of reading. If you, however, have a student with a reading disability, and let's say you gave them the UPAR, and when you gave them the UPAR, you found that their independent reading level was on the second grade, but with the auditory support, they were able to access grade level content, that student would be eligible. And you would be able to use that testing as verification that should somebody ever come and ask you why a student was listed or why they were able to receive services, you could demonstrate that yes, indeed, they had a difficulty accessing print. So students with a reading disability, identified reading disability, not just that they're weak readers, but that they do have something that demonstrates that while they cannot decode or they lack the fluency, when they're provided that auditory support, they are indeed able to access their content at a better level. So the other students that are identified as eligible on these programs are students with physical disabilities. And you can see in the bottom of this slide a young man with cerebral palsy who's sitting at his desk, and he maybe can't open up his book and hold it. Maybe he has trouble turning the pages, maybe needs to have a certain size of font in order to be able to track with his eyes, or needs extra white space, or highlighting, all those different things. So a student with a physical disability, a documented physical disability, can indeed be eligible for these resources. So again, let's just rehash those criteria. A student who's blind or visually impaired, a student who has dyslexia or some other kind of reading disability, or a student who has a physical disability which impairs his ability or her ability to access print. If you're not quite sure, there are some more additional clarifications that you can go to. If you click on the Bookshare website, if you go up to there, you can look at who can sign up for Bookshare and click on that, and they give you a little bit more of a definition of who might be qualified appropriately for these and who are the competent authorities. And you can see here that you are indeed a competent authority, particularly in the area of learning disabilities, and actually all three areas you're showing up there. So your resource specialist, your special education teacher, all of you are eligible as competent authorities, and you need to use your professional expertise to identify that the student indeed does fit into these characteristics. But you can also see who does not automatically qualify. And again, this is highlighted here on this screen. You can see do not qualify on these criteria alone. So all students with autism do not automatically qualify. A student with autism could very well qualify, but just by virtue of their autism, they do not automatically qualify. And the same, like I gave in my example, for intellectual disabilities, and you can see all these other different things. So keep that in mind. There's not an automatic acceptance or qualification for individuals based on a specific diagnosis, with the exception of low vision, blind, and dyslexia. Now let's look at the Learning Ally. They also have a help section, and you can go here and see on their help section ways to clarify, but basically they both have the same criteria for the student members who are going to utilize their services. So in Tomball School District, the way that we have our organizational chart organized is that Carrie Williams, who is the Director of Student Support, is going to be overseeing all of these recipients of the digital books throughout all the campuses. And so then each campus will have their own school designation underneath the Tomball umbrella. So we want to make sure that you are loading your students into the Tomball ISD account, because if you are using a separate account that you yourself set up, then we can't have an idea of what's going on and how our students are using and how many students need to use these materials. So it's important that you log in through the main account that we have established this year. So you can see on the slides that the people who are eligible for authorizing students or verifying their eligibility are the specialized support teacher, the dyslexia specialist, and the reading specialist. And of course, that is all contingent on your being aware of and understanding who exactly can be eligible, which is what this is all about. So what kinds of things can you use to provide evidence? You can use the UPAR. The UPAR is a really nice way to demonstrate that a student, while they have trouble reading, with the reading accommodation, which is auditory support, they have improved access, and therefore less modification of the curriculum is required. So the UPAR is a great data source. You can also use, for example, with the vision students, a medical report, or with a student with physical disabilities, a medical report. You can use your dyslexia evaluation. You can find evidence of a reading disability in the FIE that's completed by the diagnostician. All these different areas are ways that you can provide evidence for your students qualifying. And then to enroll a member, like I said, we're doing a bulk load of the students that are vision impaired or have dyslexia, but the other students we're going to need to add in individually. So on Bookshare and on Learning Ally, any teacher can add a student to a list. On Learning Ally, only certain ones can qualify. And on Bookshare, what we want to see is that you who are educated in the qualifications of these students are the ones who are adding the students to the member roster, because that way we can ensure that they are indeed eligible for the service. Once you get the student enrolled, you can assign them books, and you can assign those books from your device. You don't have to have their devices. You can just identify what books they need or which books they want. Kids on Learning Ally, once they have an account, are able to download their own books. But on Bookshare, through the organizational account, that has to be managed through one of the teachers or one of the qualifiers. It's really important that not only you enroll the student, but you teach them how to use the tools, because it's not difficult, but it's also not intuitive. And so just because their name is on a list doesn't mean that they understand how to get the book, how to access it on their device, and then how they can modify the features of whatever it is that they're using to read their story. When you are developing a student account, this is the convention that we're using throughout the district. We are using the first name of the student followed by their ID number as their username, and the password is Tomball. And I think we're using Tomball 2019, but Tomball is fine. We talked about assigning a book or a reading list. When you go into the account on Bookshare, because it's different on Learning Ally, there are reading lists that you can release that are grade level reading lists, and then you can also personalize a reading list for a student, so they can have their own recreational reading or whatever it is that they like to do. Maintenance is easy. We can do maintenance on Bookshare as a district and just move everybody up a grade level and then change their campus names. But on Learning Ally, each account has to be touched by someone who can qualify them again. So each year, at the beginning of the year, they're going to send a big email out and say, here's all the students that need to be requalified. I'm not sure why they do it that way, but I guess just so that we have a check back and make sure that, you know, students who maybe graduate aren't still accessing the materials because they are protected. If you need help, if you're having any trouble at all, if you need help training a student, if you need help for yourself because you forget how to do something, you can go to the Eduphoria website help desk and go to student support, and after you click on student support and start a new request, it's going to go and say curriculum access tools, and you can just put in what you need and somebody will come and help you with that, and we will be glad to do that. We want kids using what they need to have. So create a new request in student support, and then it's going to go to the CAT tools. You can choose CAT tools. And lastly, any questions. If you have any questions or concerns, then please contact us and we will get that taken care of. Thank you. Have a great day.